get more confident.
I'm okay.
Yeah, just pretty much if you keep it like around here,
Okay.
that's good.
All right.
But yeah, as soon as you're out of range, it's gone. Like, so
Okay.
you'll know immediately.
Yeah, I mean, I can speak very loudly if I need to, but it's fine. I'm not worried either way.
Oh, I gotta see if I was editing something last minute. I want to make sure I didn't delete.
We made just a few changes to make it a little more friendly at home and or in the room so people can see the slide and the speaker. So does that look okay for you, Sean?
Yeah, perfect.
Cool.
I think we're good. Are you able to see how many people are online? Just curious. So if you have someone that can like, is it streamlined?
So far.
Miss one, you?
I'm not watching right now live.
That's great then. You know,
Two old people, yeah.
we're a few minutes early, you know, so. And Larry will be back, so we'll have him in the
Exactly, that's
room.
counting ourselves because we're saying too. You know, four whole people.
It's
in the
true.
audience.
I've never seen this in full succession.
Just to make sure, Sean, is it loose or lose?
Luz. I go
Luz.
Luz.
Oh, okay, Luz. Good thing I checked.
Appreciate that.
I realize I've never said your last name out loud before. I've
Oh,
read it a million times.
Forgot. S-H-A-W-N.
Yes, I did
Okay,
see that because I
thank you.
Googled, or not Googled, but made sure to look up your exact title, and so I saw the SHA.
It's not a big deal. I remember seeing it last time. Like, I should probably tell them because they're they're getting that set up like right before the final. Very cool.
Another 3 minutes or so, I think. Yeah.
Awesome.
Take some time. Everybody, please help yourself to coffee and cookies.
Actually, I'll sit down and do the intro.
I'm assuming I can just hit the space bar?
Yeah.
Let's give it a
Okay.
shot. Oh, also you have this.
In case I wanted to work the room.
Yep. In your 4 slides.
Yeah, I know. I'm really gonna get into things though, so.
And I was telling Sean, I don't know if you were here for it, but with these microphones, you have to really eat the mic.
He did tell me that.
Yeah.
Yep.
Because it's so tempting to just kind of be like, yeah, and it just literally won't pick anything.
I will do it at some point.
I also think because I'm naturally a very loud person, that it's probably not gonna be.
Yeah, I tend to project from the diaphragm. My husband's even louder than I am, and sometimes I'm like, we are in the car, which is an enclosed space. Could you maybe dial the volume down just a hair? 5 people online.
And the video is not live yet.
Video is not live, but sound is live.
And is it picking up the slides yet?
No. It's a black screen with a little announcement that says the film will, or the presentation will start at 7. All right, so welcome everyone. My name is Lara Villamat, she and hers. I'm the head of Outreach and Community Experience, and we are so thrilled to have you here in the room and also at home watching live or recorded for another part of our sustainability series. We're thrilled to be partnering with the Framingham Sustainability Committee. Tonight we're going to be talking to you about Framingham's Climate Action Plan. A few quick announcements before we get started. For those of you in the room, please take this opportunity to silence your cell phones, ring those alarms, anything like that. Go ahead and turn those off for us. We do have evaluation forms on the back table, so we encourage you to take advantage of the coffee and cookies and let us know what you thought about tonight. If you have any ideas for future programs, and if you're not already on our mailing list, we'd love to have you. We're the library, so the only thing we'll ever send you is more information about great free programs. Thanks, as always, to the Friends of the Framingham Public Library, without whom events like this would not be possible. And special thanks to our partners tonight with the Framingham Sustainability Committee.
Thank you so much. It's on. It's on.
No,
I really,
it's green. Green is on.
I know how to use the mic. Thank you, everyone, and good evening. I'm Erin Ellsworth. I'm the chair of the Framingham Sustainability Committee. I'm just going to jump in and give a quick introduction to the committee before I hand it off to the main event. So our committee was actually formed just 2 years ago. Our main duties are to advise the mayor and our sustainability coordinator, engage with the public, and then also serve as a resource to the municipal departments, boards, and all the committees that we have. And as a culmination of all those things that we do, we put together an annual recommendations letter that we send to the city as well. So our committee is comprised of 9 members, and you can see them all here. And lastly, I just want to highlight some of the programming that we've been doing in partnership with the Framingham Public Library. Last month, we did a presentation on composting that is available through the Framingham Public Library YouTube if you want to watch it. We have tonight's presentation on the Climate Action Plan. And next month, no, we're not in November yet. In December, on December 14th, we will be hosting a presentation on bicycling in Framingham. And with that, I would like to hand it over to Sean Luz to talk about the Cities of Framingham Climate Action Plan.
Thank you so much, Erin and Laura. Really appreciate the Framingham Public Library and the Sustainability Committee in helping to advance the Climate Action Plan, which is one of the things that we're really excited about. It's going to set up a series of goals, strategies, and actions that over the next 5 to 10 years we're going to be able to adopt and reduce our emissions, improve our resilience to a lot of the climate impacts we're seeing, and at the same time help reduce our cost and many other benefits. So before jumping into that, I would like to take this opportunity to introduce some very awesome colleagues from the MAPC, the Metropolitan Area Planning Council. I have on Zoom Kat Cobilt. Kat, if you want to unmute, say hi.
Sure. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us. Happy to be here.
Thank you. And then also we have Emma Zenner, and apologies, Emma, if I got the last name mispronounced, but Emma, I think you're on as well.
Yes, great to be here too. Thanks, Sean.
Awesome. Thank you, guys. So with that said, we will jump right into the presentation. So first, an introduction and background on our Climate Action Plan. So what is a Climate Action Plan? Really, this is a roadmap for us to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions as well as improve our local resilience to climate change. With the support of the City Council, who in May of 2022 issued a climate emergency declaration, it was support that we needed to start this process. It also set a target for the city to achieve net zero emissions by 2050, and we'll talk a little bit about what that means. But really, to achieve a very significant goal like that is going to require the coordination of the city and many community partners and individual residents so that we can really reach that goal in a timely fashion. And also, just to highlight, Framingham isn't alone in developing a climate action plan. So many of our neighbors, including Natick, Wayland, Arlington, and also Sherborne, have either recently developed their own net zero climate action plans or are in the process of doing so. So we'll be joining them, and as well as a state effort to develop and update climate action plans covering regions and the state. So it's an important process for us to do. So before we get into the nitty gritty, let's talk about some terms. And so I'm sure many of you may be familiar with greenhouse gas emissions, but really when we talk about greenhouse gas emissions, we're talking about a lot of times the human activities such as burning oil and coal that release gases that trap heat in the atmosphere. And so there's of course also natural processes that release carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. But because after the Industrial Revolution in the 1800s, that exploded with the use of different fuels that are generating these emissions. So it's just an important thing to note that essentially our activities are increasing the rate of climate change much faster than naturally would occur. And another thing that might sound familiar, of course, I just talked about net zero emissions. So what do we mean when we say net zero emissions? So if we have that as a target by 2050, what we're really saying is we want to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions as close to zero as possible. And then we can also rely on the carbon cycle that we have to help absorb some of the emissions from the atmosphere. And so that can be things like our ocean, our plants, our trees. Of course, they're pulling in carbon dioxide, generating oxygen. So those are an important part of the process too. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. So greenhouse gas emissions, now that we have a little bit of an understanding there, they are what is causing our climate to change. So opposed to when you think of weather, right? Weather is at a point in time. We're talking about whether it's raining, it's sunny, it's cloudy, that's weather. Climate change is talking about over the long term when we look at the pattern of weather in an area. And we talk about these weather patterns and how they're shifting over time. So a great example, you might hear that over time, we're seeing higher and higher temperatures, record temperatures in summer. And that's as a result of greenhouse gas emissions inducing climate change. And so extreme heat is one of those symptoms, but we're also seeing unpredictable storms, droughts, and more. So just kind of like to piece that together, you can see on the bottom left-hand side an image of a tailpipe. Those are vehicle emissions, right? And that's contributing to the types of climate change that we're seeing, more frequent and more severe storms that are bringing flooding, like you can see here in Route 9. And this photo was taken in 2015. So I want to give you a picture of greenhouse gas emissions in Framingham, and this may be familiar to some of you that attended the workshop about a month back. We're going to cover some of that material just for those who weren't in attendance for that. But as you can see here, our emissions, I'm going to start from the smallest component of that. Our waste represents about 1.7% of greenhouse gas emissions in Framingham. And so that includes things that go to the landfill, that go to incinerator, also wastewater that is treated through our wastewater treatment systems. Our next largest component is transportation. So this includes all the commercial vehicles, passenger vehicles that we rely on, buses. All the emissions from those vehicles represent about 33.9% of the total. And then finally, our stationary energy, which is really just the emissions from our buildings that we have. So whether it's our homes, apartments, commercial, industrial, that is the largest portion of our emissions at 64%. And so if we want to look at our buildings a little bit closer and see the emissions by fuel type, that's shown here on the right. So living in Massachusetts, we have a very cold climate, cold winters, and natural gas boilers and furnaces are very popular. So when you look at the emission share of natural gas, it's not a surprise. That represents about 44% of emissions in our community. And then next up, we have electricity, of course, electricity for all sorts, our lighting, the camera that's filming this, and our air conditioning in summer. That represents about 39%, and fuel oil, the remaining 17%. And the reason that we want to cover this is really just to show, in order for us to tackle our emissions on a comprehensive level, we have to be creative and look across all these different sources of emissions. And even when you get into the category of buildings, you're also looking at how do we shift to more sustainable fuel sources that result in less emissions. And then just 2 additional terms to cover. So when we talk about responding to climate change, there's a couple key terms. There's mitigation. And when we talk about mitigating climate change, we're talking about reducing our emissions. So you can think about this as installing solar on your home. On the other side of things, when we talk about adaptation, we're talking about how do we address the effect of climate change that we experience now, right? So as the summers are getting hotter, we adapt by installing more air conditioning. To kind of continue the example of solar, solar on its own, if the power goes out, isn't going to provide you with backup electricity. But if you pair it with something like a battery storage system, now that provides you resiliency from more severe storms that could take down power lines. So just a kind of a way to think about it. And also just to highlight the arrows here going back and forth, really every project, almost every project, has a little bit of a mitigation benefit and a little bit of an adaptation benefit at minimum. So I think you'll see that as we go through some of the additional information later on. So climate change impacts. We just talked about adaptation. Climate change is already having a major impact, today, and it's going to evolve and get worse over time. So right now we're seeing more severe storms, hotter weather, flooding, high winds. It's becoming more regular, but also more unpredictable. Climate change can impact water quality. So when we think about the temperature of the water getting warmer, it actually exacerbates issues that we already have with pollution. A really common one when we talk about lawn fertilizers, right? People kind of have sometimes an incomplete picture of how our stormwater system functions. And a lot of that fertilizer will get washed out, sent to the nearest lake or pond, and then that contributes to algae blooms and reduces water quality. So a lot of these issues are really connected. One that I was really interested in as we started this process was learning more about how, as our climate gets warmer, that means mosquitoes, ticks are going to stay around longer, so that's an increased risk there. And also, of course, allergies, right? And then lastly, thinking on a global level and even locally, if we have community gardens, unpredictable climates can mean we don't have reliable food sources, right? So another thing to think about there. And just highlighting a very specific, I think, topic that we've talked a little bit about, heat islands. You might have heard this term before. We worked with the Framingham State University to do a heat island study, and we're actually awaiting some of that data. But basically, when we talk about a heat island, it's the fact that cities tend to get much warmer than their surrounding rural landscapes, particularly during the summer. So this temperature difference can be as much as 15 to 20 degrees. So if you're in an area with very little vegetation, it's all pavement and concrete, you can experience, the experience of somebody in that environment as opposed to someone that's living with a lot of trees and lush vegetation. They're at much higher risk for, any sort of heat-related illness. So something to consider there. You can actually see on the map the areas of Framingham that are much hotter, and not surprisingly, Southside Framingham with a lot more development. You can kind of see that highlighted there. And we'll get more granular data soon that we'll be able to share on a publicly accessible map. And of course, I want to highlight Kat. I completely forget which slide you were going to take off on, so feel free.
Yeah, I'll jump in here.
Okay, perfect.
Great. Thanks, Sean. That was, I think kind of going off of that map that Sean just showed of the heat islands, you'll see the map here kind of really reflects, all the communities south of really Route 9. This map we're looking at are census tracts of environmental justice communities as designated by this Commonwealth of Massachusetts. They're broken up by census tracts. And so you can see how, the communities south of that line where they experience urban heat islands are highlighted. These communities are highlighted based on various factors such as race and ethnicity, income level, language isolation. And these are really important. This tool that Massachusetts has is a really important kind of even jumping off point to talking about climate vulnerabilities. We know that not all residents experience the impacts of climate change the same. Certain communities are overburdened by climate change and in different ways. And so that previous Urban Sea Island map shows this, this environmental justice map shows this, that there are communities that experience disproportional effects. And some of these effects are higher energy costs. So if you're living in a heat island and you have to use a little bit more AC every year, that really adds up, not only to our emissions, but also the kind of monetary and other types of burdens to those families. And a lot of these areas as well experience urban heat islands based on you know, how much tree canopy is in that area, how much impervious surface like tarmac or sidewalks, things like that. So a lot of these effects are coming from, you know, previous systemic impacts such as redlining, and so centering equity in this plan is really important moving forward so that we're addressing these vulnerabilities in different ways and being strategic about making a more equitable Framingham through this climate action plan. And next slide. And so building off of that, we know that climate change, like I said, affects people in different ways, and it also affects different areas of work and different areas of society. So we have this Venn diagram here with the climate action plan in the center, or really any climate impacts in the center. And you can see how different areas like someone's health, the economy of the community, or the different environmental natural resources of the community are impacted by climate. And so we know that all of these come together, and we don't want to work in silos when we're planning in any of these areas. We could put, you know, public health in the center and have other areas that it affects on the outside. And so to not work in silos and to make sure that we're kind of working together in collaboration, we want to identify co-benefits or benefits that address these different areas through strategies. So one example, I'll pick up the economic health example is making sure that when we're building clean infrastructure and when there's a high demand for building this new green infrastructure, we can create a green workforce and well-paying jobs for our community, so that not only builds the economy of a community, but allows us to address these, you know, ideas to lower emissions and, you know, in turn helps us to mitigate against climate change. Additionally, with public health, thinking about strategies to reduce air pollution, whether it's, you know, adding more trees and reducing emissions. So these kinds of things all work together, and that's really important in this planning process. Next slide. Next slide.
I'm working on it.
Oh, great.
Let's see. There we go.
There we go. And so how do we put that all together? We're starting with a mission, and I'll read this here. In Framingham, our climate action plan will be a roadmap that will help Framingham to reduce carbon emissions with equitable strategies and actions that support the long-term social resilience and economic health of the community. So this is a really kind of lofty mission, but we have different goals, and then, you know, after that we have strategies and actions that come together. So we take this mission and kind of filter it down into different ways and think about what can we actually do to achieve this, and then, you know, that's our strategy, and then what are the actual steps that we need to do to be able to achieve this. So, you know, really specific things like funding opportunities or capacity building and at the municipal level, things like that. These, you know, that really all comes together, and they add onto each other to achieve our mission. And as we're crafting these strategies and goals and actions, we, you know, going back to climate vulnerabilities, we have guiding principles that really help us to shape these equitable strategies. So we ask ourselves continuously, who has been historically impacted, who's, you know, showing up on environmental justice maps, who have we heard lived experiences from that are telling us, you know, I've experienced this and this is my reality. So who has been impacted, underserved, overburdened, and then also who will be most impacted by the types of changes to our climate that we expect to see. So looking out into the future, what we're expecting, whether it be extreme heat, more flooding, who will be more exposed to those different climate and weather patterns and factors. And then also when we're crafting strategies, we want to make sure that we're benefiting, everyone, but also addressing these inequities as well. So who is benefiting from these strategies and how are those benefits distributed across the community? So these are kind of our guiding principles as we do that, and I'll turn it back over to Sean to talk about the different buckets we're using to organize these ideas and what we've heard so far from the previous workshop and moving forward.
Thank you, Kat. Really appreciate that. So kind of with the background of the plan and kind of like what our focus is in moving forward, we thought it would be great to report back from our first Climate Action Plan workshop some of the comments, suggestions, high-level goal ideas, strategies, kind of go through those and see if people in the room have feedback, people online have feedback, so that as we're developing those goals, strategies, and actions, we can incorporate that into that process. So right before we get into that, just want to highlight. So the 5 categories for our climate action plan will be energy, buildings and infrastructure, environment, mobility, and community resilience. And so we'll go into definitions for each of these when we get into the comments. But I want to highlight just up front that there's a lot of overlap between these categories, and I think you can make an argument that different actions, goals can kind of fall within multiple of these. But this provides us with a convenient way to really think about what are the sectors we need to focus on throughout Framingham. So we'll have to kind of play with that a bit as we move forward of where exactly things can fit. But I think that's what this discussion will be helpful with as we move forward too. And so efforts are already underway to advance sustainability in these areas, but we heard great ideas from the community on goals and strategies we can implement. And then just quickly, not that will really be a focus tonight in our discussion, but we also want to highlight, just so you have some perspective, in terms of our goals, they're going to be the kind of guiding light that will kind of illuminate the path forward, right? So they're very high level, they're broad, and then when we talk about our strategies, they are the steps that we take, right? So they are the specific pathway that we're going to use to reach that goal. So just so people have that in mind. So with that said, let's jump into our first category, energy. So I'll just read from here. Energy, the sources of energy that supply our community and power our homes, businesses, and transportation. Improving the sustainability of energy that we consume by adopting more renewable energy and promoting local clean energy development can significantly contribute to reduced greenhouse gas emissions and provide opportunities for enhanced energy resilience. And so really with this category, the idea is separated from the specific use that it goes towards. So, we're not talking specifically about buildings, we're not talking about vehicles. I think when you talk about the community energy supply, there's area for a discussion there. And one current action that we did want to highlight was with a community electricity program that's currently in development. Some of you may be familiar with this. Basically, the city is working on developing an electricity aggregation program where the city purchases on behalf of residents electricity supply. And so what this can do is offer better cost certainty for residents, but at the same time, it allows the city to increase the amount of renewable energy supply that's backing our electricity consumption. And also it gives people options, right? So you'll be able to choose, I want to go with a default option that has this much additional renewable energy, or I want to go with a much higher level that has 100% renewable energy. So that's just to kind of put that in your head, one action that's underway. With that said, if I can navigate the slide, there we go. So what we've heard from our first workshop, these are really kind of like quick comments, but what I'm hoping too is we can have a discussion on some of these. Maybe you'll see some of these ideas and think, hey, this is a great add-on to that. Or I don't think, maybe that's not the best way to go. I have a different opinion. Or if you can always reach out after if something comes up. But so, of course, some of the things that we heard, having a community that's powered by 100% clean energy, City of Framingham that's completely electrified, fossil fuels are a thing of the distant past. And also, some interesting comments about how we pursue the development of clean energy in our community. I think this is also, an important issue to think about. So the comment on the right-hand side, solar installations not at the cost of our trees, I think is a good one, and it's a fair one. We often hear of larger solar developments where there's a lot of clear cutting, taking out some of the natural assets we have that can trap carbon emissions, and also provide other, just having that as a resource for mental health, ecology, like they're valuable parts of our community. So when we talk about deploying solar, we want to make sure we do it in a way that, for instance, we're putting on our rooftops, parking lots. I think, just reading into that comment, that's kind of what I took from it. There's also a comment here about really advancing alternative and renewable energy systems when it's not in the conflict with the character of the surrounding neighborhood. So I think that's an interesting one, and like as I thought about that, I was thinking of our historical buildings. What is the process, for us to, or is this a discussion we should have about our historical buildings? What's the process if you wanted to deploy solar on a building designated as historical? We have a historical commission, and I think that would be a great next step. Wondering if anybody in the audience is, they either live in a historical home or this is something they've ever thought about, but that could be an issue there if we think about how prevalent solar and these other clean energy technologies should be in the future. We're going to run into that, eventually. So, and then of course, it's highlighted addressing energy burden. I think Kat did a great job of highlighting that earlier. If you are lower income, you live in an area that's a heat island, you're going to be spending more comparatively on your AC. And as a portion of your budget, it's going to make up a much larger portion, right? So that's an energy burden for you. And when we talk about advancing these clean energy solutions, we need to also think about equity. How is this going to benefit people that also maybe, if our goal is to deploy solar across the whole community, there's going to be a lot of people that maybe can't afford the upfront cost. Maybe there's technical, there's a lot of energy scams. So we need to be mindful that if the goal is to advance this across the community, people who have been preyed upon, lower income, and may not have the resources, even if it's an excellent offer, if it sounds too good to be true, it might not be something they're willing to buy into. So there needs to be a level of education about how to evaluate, these different types of opportunities. And then, another comment here, wind and solar renewable energy combined with backup batteries. And I think I mentioned earlier, backup batteries is an important resilience source for us. So I'll open it up if anyone has any reactions, general thoughts on these, additional ideas. This is,
Sean,
of course.
Sorry, can I jump in just for a moment to
Sure.
invite the folks on YouTube who are watching? Please feel free to put any comments or questions in the chat. I'll read them out loud to Sean, and he can answer them. And then also, Sean, if you wouldn't mind just repeating or summarizing the question or comment from the audience before you address it so the folks at home can hear about it too.
Sure, awesome. And Laura, do you think I could give the audience member the mic as well?
Yeah, if you'd like. I
Awesome.
have a spare in here too that I'm currently using as the voice overall.
Cool. All right. Awesome. So with that said, any comments online? And we also have Emma from the MAPC team online who's going to help with pulling out some of those comments. But I'm wondering if anyone has any initial feedback, interest. Okay, great.
So I'm Isabel Petroni. I wanted to add on to the comment on the point with the solar installations not at the cost of trees. I know it's also, you were talking about the idea of use of parking lots, and I think that's a great idea, not only for the fact of preventing habitat loss, but also it makes it so there's not as much building of transmission lines if it's closer. Framingham's growing its population more and more, and there are more people moving in. So if the solar and other forms of energy are closer to the city, it allows it for energy to be more easily stored. It allows it for it to be more easily distributed, and also allows spaces that wouldn't have thought otherwise to be reclaimed in a way. But it makes it so solar is tangible, because I think sometimes the issue with the solar farms that we think of in big wide open areas is that it's farther away from the communities utilizing it versus it being in parking lots that have cars and have a wide open space that could be even more easily usable.
That's a great point. Thank you. Yeah, I think, another interesting thing to think about, I've seen projects elsewhere, and I think Massachusetts, there's a demonstration project for this, but agrivoltaics is a new thing to explore, where it's raised solar panels over existing farm use, right? So there might be different plantings that perform better in somewhat shaded conditions as opposed to just direct sunlight. And so you can kind of maintain a farming use while having solar panels provide, energy for different processes on site, or just, additional revenue that might help keep, a farm afloat if finances are, challenging.
Is it possible for the city to control or require solar panels on new construction?
That's a great question. Actually, so we do have some comments on the next section for buildings and infrastructure. It's a great point. I think really the main way for that to happen is through the building code. And we'll talk a little bit about that in the next section too.
A question, are these, the comments in yellow, are those goals for the city?
Everything's thrown together. Yeah, sorry. So I think these are just kind of, for some context, we took these from different activities we did on the workshop. The main activity that we got a lot of feedback from was a visioning session. So in 2050, Framingham is, as sustainable as it can be. What do you see in your vision?
Okay, that would be a great vision for 2050.
Yeah.
And two great examples of solar power in Framingham are the Cloverleaf at the Mass Pike, and then over at Odessa, they cover several parking lots with solar panels. And it seems like the problem of the heat sinks in the downtown area would be great opportunities to put solar there on the top of buildings or in the top of parking lots, just like Odessa does.
Yeah.
So problem and a solution right there.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. And I think it's something we're looking at, especially on the municipal side. We have a couple installations. We have one that's complete and one that's just finishing up at 2 schools. And then we have another rooftop project. But I think finding those locations and trying to figure out if it hasn't advanced so far, maybe there are technical, ways that whether it's businesses or other property owners can be supported.
Sean mentioned the 2 school projects, but multiple religious organizations in the cities have been added their own solar canopies, including Temple Beth Am and St. Andrews.
That's a great point.
Is it possible, in terms of trees, is it possible to have the town purchase trees for residents to plant?
That's a great question. So I know in the past we had, I see hand raised.
The city did have a program, and there's a new grant eligibility that just opened up. I believe it's a federal grant through the government that we can purchase and apply for trees.
Residents can then apply and get a tree?
And just so the question was, residents could apply and get a tree, and the answer was yes. So if we receive, that funding opportunity. I think that's an excellent point too. Obviously that's something that we want to promote as a community. I think we were looking at a project like that, and one of the community engagement challenges we were thinking of is like, how do we get people to kind of take this on as like a community initiative, right? Not just a one-off. If you're interested, reach out to us, but creating like an environment where people are like, oh, did you hear about this program? I just got a free tree. Because the other part of it is like helping them take care of that over time, making sure that it grows to its full potential. And also, after this, we'll give some room. Emma, I don't know if we have any comments online, but just in case, feel free to jump in after this one.
Does anybody know, does the city have any plan to get electric vehicles for the police department?
So we're looking into that right now. So right now, the police department has switched really as a, unless there are specific exceptions, but really the default is hybrid vehicles. And that's, it's perfect for reducing the idling that kind of just naturally happens, with any police.
Right, because I live right by Framingham State, and the police department there is idling all the time, and they don't have any electric vehicles, and it's a huge source of air pollution there.
Yeah. I think across our fleet, we're starting to look at that. And as you know, with the parking garage, you may have heard the parking garage behind City Hall. I think that's going to tie heavily into the future of the city fleet. So many departments are based out of the City Hall. So making sure we have the infrastructure there is going to be a #1 priority so that we can more easily transition vehicles over time.
On the solar installation, not at the cost of trees, I think it is important to maximize solar installation without affecting the natural environment, but it shouldn't be saying no to solar if it affects trees, but trying to mitigate any impacts that new solar would have.
Yeah, that's a great point. I mean, to the point of resiliency too, it's not, it's not a happy situation, but of course, if you have an older tree that is in poor health and it is near a power line, like, we have tree trimming regularly through the utility to minimize risk. But if you have an older tree and that's in the way of, like, let's say it's shading a potential solar system you might put in, I don't think the answer is necessarily, there's no situation where, a tree like that can't be taken down to allow for a solar PV system. But I think being mindful, right, of kind of, it's not all like we're just going to push in one path and forget the externalities. I think that's what this whole process is really about, to make sure we're being careful about how we're trying to promote different things. Oh.
Since you're going to ask her for comments.
Oh, yes. Kat, Emma, do you know if we have any comments to share on the line side?
I don't see any questions. I just see one comment that the First Parish in Framingham also has benefited from solar panels for many years.
Awesome. All right, great. So I think with that, we'll go on to the next one that will also get into building code. So on buildings and infrastructure, this is our next category in our plan. And so once again, I'll just read kind of from this description. So homes, businesses, facilities, and the infrastructure that supports them, such as utilities, play a critical role in the health of the community. For example, buildings that are energy efficient with good insulation and clean heating and cooling systems like heat pumps will use less energy, produce less greenhouse gas emissions, and can contribute to healthier indoor and outdoor environments. When paired with resilient infrastructure like stormwater drainage systems and power utilities, high-performing buildings can be more resilient to the impacts of climate change like severe storms, flooding, and extreme heat. And so to get into comments that kind of fell within this category, before that, highlighting an exciting project that's happening in Framingham now. You may have heard of the Eversource geothermal pilot project that's coming to a neighborhood in Framingham right off of Concord Street. And so really, I think this is at the heart of what this category is about. It's advancing a clean heating and cooling system. It's going to tie in, I believe it's about 36 homes, our fire station 5, the Mass Bay / Farley building. You can see on the top left of that area. And then also a number of Framingham housing authorities that are housing for elderly residents as well. So it's a really diverse mix of buildings, of residents that are going to be tied on. There's also some businesses too, I forgot to mention. But we're really excited about it. And the other thing that's awesome about this project is that working with a couple organizations, we have secured the opportunity to design an expansion to this pilot. And if that's successful, we will be eligible for additional funding to actually do the expansion. So we're working on that now, and the construction is underway. You might have seen, if you go down Concord Street, the drilling at Fire Station 5. Yeah, really awesome project we're excited about. And so in addition to that, what have we heard in our first workshop? So I think to a point that was made earlier, new construction has insulation and high energy savings. All buildings have solar panels, and then there's also, comment, all public buildings have solar panels. And so on the municipal side, that's something we're definitely pursuing now. We're actually working in a DOE Department of Energy program to do a kind of comprehensive procurement across municipal facilities. But then on the residential side, I think that's something we've been trying to promote too. We participated in a regional program to help people buy solar and heat pumps. There's other ways that can be promoted, right? So I think one of them that was brought up earlier, if it's required, the way to do that would be through building code. And right now, Framingham there's 3 different versions of the energy code that's available in our state. There's the base energy code, there's the stretch energy code, which Framingham falls under, and then there's the specialized opt-in energy code. And in the specialized opt-in version, solar is required for different types of development. So I think that would be It's very difficult to do through zoning and other methods from a legality basis, as I understand it. But through building code, that could be an opportunity for Framingham to pursue that. A really interesting one that we got was about building products that go into our new construction. So a lot of times, I talk a lot about the energy efficiency of the equipment in the building, but the materials we use have embodied carbon in them, right? So we can design buildings in a way that uses less carbon and contributes less to climate change. And so just kind of an eye towards that, maybe there are ways we could promote more sustainable materials in the buildings that are going in. Also, we heard about solar reflective coating for reflecting heat off parking lots, which is a really interesting idea, in kind of combination with trying to increase the amount of tree canopy that we have in our downtown. Maybe this is an option that could be explored. Essentially, I think it would involve painting, the surface of the road a lighter color. More of that heat's being reflected up, and as I understand, it could reduce surface temperature by about 10 degrees. It's being explored in California pretty heavily right now, and something that maybe we can consider as part of our climate action plan. And then just a couple last things, really important to highlight, rental housing, right? So when we talk about improving the efficiency of rental housing, it's tricky. Renters can only do so much. In a lot of cases, they can't upgrade their HVAC system alone, and that requires kind of coordination with property owners. And there's a little bit of a split incentive issue sometimes when we talk about, making upgrades to a building, what the renter may want and what might make sense to a property owner. So there may be areas that we could step in with technical resources, directing property owners and renters to financial resources that are available through Mass Save, other programs. And then just one last comment about electrification with geothermal energy and heat pumps. So I'm going to pause there, see if anyone has any comments. I'll also just see what's in the chat. It's also 7:40, so we're going to move through some of the other items pretty quickly. But any initial comments? We'll take a couple in case there are. Oh, there we go.
Can you share with us the efficiency ratings in terms of solar panels and if they are improving, if that's a process that's ongoing or?
Yeah. So over the years, that efficiency rating isn't. Oh, Larry, did you want to speak to that? Oh, okay. So over the years, solar panel efficiency is increasing. If you look back like 10 years, I'm trying to remember what the panel rating might have been at that time, maybe like 16%. It's over, I think it's like 21%. So it is improving over time. There's also, so we actually are considering this for one facility. There are panels, if you have a white roof, some of that light that hits the roof will be reflected back up. So you can get dual-sided panels that will capture some of that lost energy that's coming off the back of the roof. So something to consider if you have, that's usually for commercial properties and things like that. But so yeah, it's a good.
Still a low efficiency rating.
Yeah, and there are other ones. So we're talking about the geothermal system. Granted, in this climate, it's tough to make the economics work. We haven't dived too far into it, but you could have a combined solar system and geothermal system. So it uses the excess heat to then heat water that would go, connect to for instance, a geothermal pilot. So that's something that we're interested in as well, but that's a good point. All right, so I think we're just gonna, Larry.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that if you look at the housing stock in Framingham, a lot of it's old. The stretch code is a wonderful thing, but it only deals with new buildings. So we need to develop a program to incentivize landlords and homeowners in these older buildings to retrofit them, to increase their installation and new windows and new roofs and solar panels, if that is called for in the area where they are. So this is, there's a lot of bills before the Massachusetts legislature to make funding for that to happen.
Thank you. We're just going to move forward, just understanding that we don't have a ton of time. So next category, environment. Natural environments like forests and wetlands can store greenhouse gas emissions that would otherwise contribute to climate change. In addition to protecting and preserving our green spaces and water bodies, we can support our natural environment by reducing the waste we generate through actions like recycling and composting. Promoting a healthier natural environment can make our community more resilient to flooding and reduce the impact of extreme heat in the summer. So just to highlight another project, so through an MVP grant, our community planning and conservation department they secured a municipal vulnerability preparedness grant to acquire property in South Framingham that will go under conservation restriction. This was done in partnership with neighboring communities, so really exciting. It's going to be a resource for many years to come and help achieve some of those benefits we just talked about. So what did we hear? A lot of interest in supporting our local farms, advancing community gardens, interest in compost, so having a compost option that's available as weekly recycling and trash is, protection of green spaces we already have, native plants and pollinator gardens in our homes, and more tree canopy cover, prioritizing the south side, getting to the point we talked about with heat islands. And then I think a really understated one too, youth education related to sustainable food growth. I know the Framingham Public Schools have done an amazing job with that. I think it is an important area, but I'm wondering if we have a couple thoughts, particularly on this one. I should also highlight improved safety of local waterways for swimming. So that's a really critical one as well. Any initial feedback, thoughts, comments? I'll open it up to online as well, just in case there's anything there.
No questions yet from online.
Okay.
I'm partially going to combine this point into a bit from the last point, talking about green infrastructure. But one of the things that I was part of a program over the summer with FSU, with high school students discussing things about urban heat islands. And in addition to doing solar and white roofs and black roofs and retrofitting, we talked a lot about green infrastructure and green building infrastructure. And we did a whole entire studies and made a green roof. And what we found overall, that on old buildings that we designed in that way, that it could reduce not only the heat surrounding the building itself, but it also could reduce the heat inside the building, reducing the need for air conditioning. So this idea of combining both this idea of what we think of as traditional building with more sustainable or green building practices involving plants could be really interesting, in addition to making tree cover possible, combining those two elements as well.
Awesome. All right, and on to our next section. Just doing a quick time check, mobility. So how we get around the community has a big impact on our greenhouse gas emissions, outdoor air quality, and how we experience climate change impacts. In addition to opportunities such as adopting electric vehicles, increased community use of public transportation, and alternative transportation options like walking and biking can have major benefits for Framingham. So highlight another exciting project here. So many people are probably familiar with the Bruce Freeman Trail, rail trail, and the city's acquisition of CXX property that will help complete it, and on the Framingham side. So, this is obviously going to open up more opportunities for people to bike, to walk, to use this not only as a great kind of like health opportunity, but it also provides, in a way, transportation to other communities, and it provides connectivity to other places in Framingham. But of course, mobility is also broad, much broader. You'll see from some of the comments here. Really promoting a walkable city, investigating pedestrian connections in downtown Framingham between Farm Pond, Cushing Memorial Park, rail trails connecting north, south, east, and west, making biking more accessible, and then a really interesting one, using trees and mini forests for infiltration and traffic calming. I think is a really interesting suggestion. And of course, electrifying our municipal fleet, including our school buses, and then just in general, how can we advance the electrification for individual home, for residents in Framingham and businesses. And then be remiss not to talk about, how we can support public transportation and reduce car ownership, because that's an important part of the puzzle. It's not just making vehicles more efficient, but if we can get more people on public transportation, we're reducing the amount of trips and emissions associated. So any quick comments on this section? A couple?
There's a great example of this with the Bruce Freeman Rail Trail connecting to the Chris Walsh Trail around Farm Pond, and that would be making it the 3-mile loop around Farm Pond accessible to the downtown community as well. So that would be an awesome infrastructure improvement for Framingham.
In related to the biking is more accessible, as Framingham becomes more urban, especially downtown, I think it's important that we consider programs like what Boston, Everett, Cambridge, and Somerville have, where people can share bikes and borrow bikes and return them to different locations in the city.
Thank you both for that. And,
And on the biking theme, making sure that you can walk and bike to where people want to go, not just like around a community, but to grocery stores and schools and work as well.
connectivity with destinations. Okay, great. So I'm going to move on to then the final section, community resilience. So what this is getting at is strengthening the ability of residents and businesses to withstand, cope, recover from, and thrive in the face of climate change will be critical to the health of the community. To have the greatest impact for all, strategies and actions to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and improve local resilience must address the unequal experience of climate change impacts across the community, including elderly, low-income, and other residents in environmental justice neighborhoods. Building strong neighborhood networks to be more prepared for climate hazards and supporting local small businesses to adopt sustainable practices are some examples of this. And we thought this was a really important category to include because I think, obviously equity is a focus of the whole plan, but having a specific section that kind of catches, maybe there might be some measures that don't contribute significantly to emissions, but they are important to making sure everybody is able to take advantage of these climate actions that we're proposing. So just to highlight, we did a recent project with the Public Information Officer, with other communities, and the Metropolitan Area Planning Council, where we developed climate resilience communications with liaisons from environmental justice neighborhoods and figured out what is the way we reach people in your neighborhood, what type of, can you help us shape the actual mailer that we send out? So such a fantastic process and something we hope to adopt as we work on more projects. And so what have we heard? We heard a lot. So, thinking about access to food during emergency events, understanding and planning for the impact of climate change on emergency rooms, and then thinking about cooling centers and areas where there are no trees, increased public parks, which may provide natural cooling areas, splash pads, which are a huge priority for the mayor, and I know that we already have some projects that are underway, air conditioning for homes, including renters. Then also talking about, I think an important part of this too is workforce opportunities. So green jobs, that's going to be an important part of this. And also health. So partnering with the community health center to do outreach about air quality, addressing air pollution, and then conducting outreach to seniors on climate tailored to different age ranges within retirement age, accessible online prep materials, and a big one, language barriers, which is what we explored with our climate resilience communications. So any comments on this last category? Is a lot here, but wondering if anything jumps out to anybody. Okay, well, no problem. But yeah, and what I would say too is we're going to be closing out, and I'm just going to describe some additional resources that you can help us as we develop this plan and continue this conversation. But if you have any ideas on any of those categories after this, feel free to shoot us an email. We're going to have our email at the end. We want to hear them. We're developing our goals, and that's going to inform every next step in the process. So we want to hear from you. So just to give you an idea of what our schedule looks like, basically, we've done our first community workshop. We're going to be setting up some working group meetings to dive further into these categories. And then at some point, the end of this year, we're going to have a second community workshop. The best way to keep up to date with this, we have a newsletter that we've been sending out updates on. Some of you may have actually gotten the notice through that. So if you haven't, I'll also have that information later on. Make sure you're signed up. One thing that we do want to announce, we changed the name of it, and I didn't change it here. It's not called the Meeting in a Box Toolkit. It's called the Climate Conversations Toolkit. So really what we wanted to do is, we went through a lot in this presentation, and it's probably not enough time, especially if you're unfamiliar with some of the topics. We wanted to prepare a series of resources that you could have accessible at any time. So we created, for instance, a climate conversation guide that has some general questions, climate priority survey, a mapping tool, like an interactive mapping tool that you can go online and like you can actually drag and drop a point and put, you know, for instance, I experienced flooding in this area. This is a good area to look at green infrastructure improvements. This would be a great area for solar. You can make those types of suggestions right on a map of Framingham. We have some social media graphics you can share, as well as some of the other materials that we've used, including summary slides that give you a great breakdown of like the basics of climate change in this process. So really, what you're going to be able to use this toolbox for is to have conversations with your friends, family. Maybe you're part of groups where like this could be a great topic to discuss. And even if it's not a conversation, there are tools here that you can use to provide us directly with feedback. So we hope it's a useful tool, and we're going to work on it over time. So as we get feedback, we're going to try to shape this and add more to it. And Kat, I realized I'm talking during your section as well. I'm going to turn it over to you to kind of talk about the rest of these resources.
Yeah, thank you, Sean. Yeah, we're really excited, that the Sustainability Committee and the Public Library is giving us this additional outreach, because we're really excited about these tools that you can take home and use in your communities, especially with people, who aren't here tonight, weren't at the first workshop possibly, folks that we haven't reached yet, especially in priority populations like youth, elders, different backgrounds, different languages. So we really want to use, help give these tools to you so that you can use them. And if folks weren't at the previous engagement events, they don't need context to use these tools and give us input about their priorities for the future of Framingham. So, we have on the left, we have a postcard. I'll just go through quickly. A postcard that you can download, print, and give out. We have a priority survey, which I'll share the link to. We have a visioning survey, which is where a lot of that feedback that Sean went through. That's where we got that from. Is we did this survey exercise at the previous workshop, and so folks can do that, at home as well. And then we have additional resources like a larger poster with more information and the mapping tool that Sean detailed. So on the next slide, we have the community mapping tool that we've been discussing. The link is right there. If you're at home on a screen, you can just scan that QR code and play around with it. And like Sean said, you can drag that kind of top bar, drag the comment, you can drag those icons down and write your thoughts there. You can also visit the link mapc.ma/capmap. And then on the next slide is another really important tool for us. We want to get this survey out to as many people as possible. So it's a climate priority survey, and it will really guide you through different questions and how you can supply the best information to really hear your voice in this plan. So telling us about the hazards you've experienced, but also your priorities to kind of fixing those and learning how to be resilient against those. And so those are just some tools that we'll leave you with, but like Sean said, we do want to hear from you, so email us, visit the website. All of these tools that we just discussed are on the website, so you can download them. That's a really good resource to always go to for updates and other things. And then the sustainability newsletter, you can scan this QR code and stay tuned on the website, in the newsletter, etc., for future events. I think I'll pass it back over to you, Sean.
Thank you, Kat. One thing I did want to highlight, if you go on the website now, most of the, I'm trying to think, we made some recent changes to resources that we're working on translations. They will be available in at least 3 languages, English, Spanish, and Portuguese. And we also have some that are available in Haitian Creole. So we're working on getting all of that all set up. So whichever language you prefer, you're going to have that resource available. Yeah, feel free to check it out. You can reach us at cap@framingham.ma.gov. If you scan that QR code on the bottom right, you'll also get the link to the newsletter, which is a great way to stay up to date about upcoming events. And stay tuned for future engagement opportunities. So we'll try to post them on the city website and through there as well. With that, I wanted to thank everybody for coming tonight. We ended up being right on time, 7:59, giving you a minute to spare. But no, really, we really appreciate you guys coming down, and to the people watching online, it really means a lot, and it's so helpful for this process the more that we hear from the community. We hope to continue this moving forward. So thank you again, everybody, and have a great night.
Everyone.
Don't mind. Sorry, just give a brief outro if you don't mind. Thank you all again so much for being here tonight, both in the room and online. I do want to request again, if anybody who's in the room, we'd love to hear from you on our survey in the back. Please take advantage of all the coffee and cookies you would like. And then I do want to make sure to invite you all to our December 14th event on a Thursday night. We'll be talking about bicycling in Framingham. Sounds like that's a topic you all are pretty enthused to talk about. So we hope that you'll join us either online or in person for that as well. So we'll see you then. Have a good night, everyone. Oh, yep.
One last announcement. If you are interested in working groups or just continued collaboration, or if you don't want to scan the QR code and you want me to put you on the list, feel free to sign. We have a sign-up sheet at the back. You can put your name, email, or phone number, or you don't have to put that either. It's totally up to you. But we'll try to get you on the newsletter, and then also we can reach out if you are interested in participating in a working group. So that said, have a great night, everybody. Thank you again.
Thanks, John.